Welcome everyone to this summary of day one at the Pareto conference this year. It's the 29th time we have it, and we are back in Holmenkollen with record high attendance both from companies as investors. It's been almost 170 companies, almost 2,000 investors and industry professionals. And Nadia, with that, what do you think is kind of the key points to start discussion here?
Okay, number one theme going into this was that we need everything in terms of oil, gas, renewables to try to resolve this energy crisis in Europe. We've definitely seen that that is the truth. In addition though, we've also heard how we need metals. So it's not only about the energy side. If we want to solve the energy problem, we also need metals, and we also need storage, and we need an entire revamp of the system.
And when you say needing metals, that's of course to enable the energy transition, right?
Exactly,
yeah.
So copper, number one.
Yeah.
Thing that we were discussing on that side. The other major point that came out in this that I'm very proud of actually is we had what was a panel, but it really turned into a debate. And we were able to discuss the place of oil and gas and renewables in solving the energy crisis and the energy revolution that we will go through in transition, sitting in the same room, which is not something that has been typical, I think, in a lot of these more polarized discussions where people think one way or the other as to what is the solution.
Yeah, so very often, you have an oil conference and you have a renewable conference. This is basically the best of both worlds, take it together. I think the panel, of course, interesting to see, started off with the Statkraft CEO, biggest renewable producer in Europe, commenting on kind of their plans and ambitions and how they see the world, and walking through all of it, and then you're ending up with Trame that view the world quite differently from kind of how the solutions are to going forward. So
and of course the stage was set by the German Vice Chancellor Habeck, who was explaining a willingness to work with Norway and find a way to resolve this. But very importantly, he stated that we need prices to be high enough for gas and power to not make demand grow even more. We need to actually facilitate a balance. But on the other hand, he was speaking how we have the problem of helping households through this. And it was a very good way to set the tone for trying to come up with the solutions within our panel discussion.
And how do you read Habeck there, sitting and looking? Of course, he has seen and done a lot of research on the German energy market and the outlook for the winter. His comments, how do you as an analyst of the markets of commodities then view that? Is he basically saying that you need demand destruction here because we will not be able to provide the energy needed
he is absolutely showing a willingness to push that, and that needs to be prioritized on the industrial side, not on the personal consumer side. But at the same time, we do have this ongoing debate and discussion. What does that mean in terms of price caps for power and for gas? And we keep seeing seesaws from the government. Yesterday, the German chancellor said we're not going for a price cap. Today, they said they're going for a price cap. And this is very difficult for the companies that were in our panel to work with. That really came out when they don't know what is happening.
And of course, but at the same time, I guess that's going a lot to new investments and how to deal with that. But at the same time, I think everyone now is producing maximum, right? Given the current prices and also the need for that product in Europe, given the crisis created by Russia now, cutting off the gas.
Exactly, and for example, also what Maria, from a board member of Schlumberger, Maria Hansen, was talking about, that yes, they've had a reduction in their headcount, but they've reached much more efficiency. They've been pursuing digitalization. They want to pursue all of this, but they still, and they want to grow that core business, but they still need the signals from the market and the willingness from all of the companies to facilitate that activity.
And actually do it,
Exactly, and that is of course more of the longer term solution, but some of it is also medium term, right? Because we can have one thing is what we get through this winter, right, in demand destruction. We then need to prepare ourselves for next winter, which is what the chief economist of Trafigura really focused on. He's much more concerned about next winter versus this winter. So what can we do on the policy side or on the company side to help with that?
I thought that was a very interesting point, because right now everyone is focusing on getting through this winter, but his take was basically this winter will be difficult, will be painful, you will see some shutdown of industries, things like that, but we will get through it. The difficult thing in his mind was actually next year again.
Yeah, and that's even in our own analysis, we see that if we don't have at least 20% demand destruction with probably normal weather, we will be at much, much lower near bottom storage levels, by April, starting to prepare for next winter. And then that really lays out the demands for companies like Equinor. What are they going to do?
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, of course. Speaking of Equinor, I think it was obviously interesting in their presentation to see what they are hoping for. They are hoping now that political parties and movement and the EU is moving much faster on permitting and those kind of things to move these big projects forward. And then we're of course talking about renewables within the European Union, where they hope to take a bigger market share. But where things actually historically has taken quite a long time to get things through.
And I think you brought up a very good question when you asked Ulrika, their CFO, what is the flexibility in the system to boost gas even more? And she reminded us that, we're doing everything we can. We're delaying maintenance. We're not injecting gas. We're sending that over to Europe. We have to come up with a short-term solution, but it's very difficult. We need a long-term solution with the short-term in mind.
Yeah. That's probably correct. And I think one of the key takeaway that I would say here is obviously industry is ready with technology and capacity to invest, and both sides, but especially long-term for the renewable side, where they benefit from a lot of the cost structure come down, things like that as well, and a bit more predictable pricing in electricity maybe than what you have had historically on oil and gas.
Well, they're at least higher. Predictable, I don't know about that. They're at least elevated.
Not the prices you have now, but in kind of historically, it's probably been a bit more of a stable market, and sometimes some has even offered you some contracts to lock in some prices, while oil and gas, of course, has always been cyclical. But there, I think it's really, the industry is ready, investors obviously are ready to put money at work here, but it is up to now the policymakers to actually, handle the permits, give people access to the grid, and enable them to build out wind power and build out solar and all of this. Because right now it's like, if you have $1 billion, you cannot just start to build something. It takes years to get approval for it.
Exactly. There are too few projects. We heard that reiterated in the Aker panel discussion with our CEO, Jonas, that there are a lack of good projects available. We also saw that framework is way too slow. And in contrast maybe to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, actually, which came up in, for example, the Talos company presentation on, what does that mean for them? And okay, it means that there's a little bit of a slowdown for E&P permitting because it alternates with renewables, but at least you know where you are in the queue. And then on the second half, we have a huge CCS tax credit coming in the US with that carrot approach. So things can start to move there. So I think we have discussed, this is a huge opportunity for other policymakers to see what the US has put forward.
Because now the US is actually in front again on the climate, right? On kind of the whole package and how much they do to secure energy and make sure that it moves in the right direction. So just to mention, we highlighted early in the day as well that this is expected to bring down US emissions with 40% by 2030. It's just a massive figure. So is it an inflation act or is it an inflation creator, do you think?
Well, on certain parts, I mean, this is what we heard from Schlumberger, right? Yeah. That they were saying that, they are starting to feel these cost pressures, and we know that the E&P companies, even if you want to build things, or on the renewable side, you still need to get the materials to build it. And this is where it comes back to, you need the metals, you need the energy part of creating the energy, but you get the upside when you're the energy producer. On the metal side, that's just the sunk cost. And that's where we had 5 battery companies presenting today, and they were talking about how the demand for the industry has been much, much higher and faster than they thought, because the automobile industry is really connected to it, and that they really believe that they can offer the solutions for short-term storage, intermittently hour to hour. And it's where in our electricity presentation from Pareto, Lars Skorpin talked about, you know, how you have this arbitrage opportunity all the time in power, but the fundamental problem is we need all energy to create the power. That's how we will actually resolve this.
And I think one thing on power that I just wanted to mention there was quite interesting with Kristiansen in Aker Horizons talking about the potential in northern Norway, you know, where we actually have seen very, very low power prices this year, and we have record high levels in with production as well. So there you have ample capacity to actually build some green industries at scale again. Almost like Norway did 100 years ago when we first got the hydropower. Now we can actually expand once more in the areas like that are basically a power market that's a bit locked in, right? Isn't that the case? That's why you have the low prices, because you can't move it.
Exactly.
So you can then expand. So I thought that also was an interesting part, is the high ambitions they have especially in Narvik, but also northern Norway, and they are moving very fast on that, and actually already started kind of some construction work, things like that. So I think the ambition level there is much higher than the market has realized.
And I think my final comment really is at the level of excitement in the room, hearing these discussions. You know, on the one side, oil and gas, how is this fitting in? How is this fitting in on the renewables question? People are worried, people are passionate about energy security now, and they want the solutions, and the companies here and the politicians are here to discuss it. Yeah,
that's correct. And I think also, you know, it's a bit like we ended the session early in the day, and it's highlighted several times today. So, you know, we need more of everything basically when it comes to energy right now. So it's clearly that investments will come up, and
exactly.
I think that's
one of my favorite quotes was Erik saying that we are an energy company at Equinor. We are not only a renewables company, we are not only an oil and gas company. That's the thing to remember for them.
Oh, they are an energy company with a lot of capital now to invest. So I think they highlighted they paid 70 billion Norwegian in taxes in August alone this year. So it is, of course, going well for them, but that also means increased capacity to do new things. So I think that's maybe a place to leave it here now. That energy industry is back to growth.
Exactly.
People need more investment, and we think that will come out of this.
Exactly, and tomorrow we will hear more about everyone's enthusiasm for shipping and the rest.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.